other people, but I've never heard that specific group play with Theo before.
I'm Greg Cavanaugh of the Gallup Journey Magazine. Just got done with an awesome hike here in New Mexico, and I wanted to take a minute to show you what I'm driving right now. This is the Ford C-Max. It's Ford's new hybrid, kind of fresh off the boat from Europe, and I thought you guys would want to take a look, so let's check it out. Let's talk HairBands. I got to thinking about HairBands on my hike, and here's what I think. Van Halen really could be considered one of the first HairBands. Kick and lead guitarist, glam rock kind of feel from the 70s with the rock kind of almost metalish sound. Well, after Van Halen, as you know, many hair bands followed suit. Motley Crue, Poison, Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, and even Firehouse. Nonetheless, they were variations on really Van Halen's established theme, which was those things I mentioned, and they just took their variations to kind of find their own niche within that hairband market. Well, this C-Max is doing exactly that. So when it comes to hybrids and having a hybrid specific line and so forth, the Prius is Van Halen, right? They set the benchmark for what it means to be a hybrid specific line. It's not a variation on another non-hybrid car. The Prius is a hybrid. You don't say a Prius hybrid, you just say Prius. Well, Ford has developed that same idea with the C-Max. They're all hybrids. There's no non-hybrid version of it. And of course, it is a theme on that same hybrid benchmark that the Prius established in terms of size, in terms of capacities, in terms of fuel economy, in terms of price. So we're going to analyze this car very quickly based on those criteria compared to its competition. So let's take a look. So, what makes the C-Max different than its competitors? Well, let's just get down to it, okay? When it comes to size, it slots somewhere between, if you will, the Prius 3rd Gen and the Prius V. Prius V is bigger in cargo capacity, both behind the second row and with the seats folded down, but not by much with the seats folded down. We're talking like 66 versus 50-something. However, I compared the cargo capacity of this car versus the 3rd Gen Prius that a buddy of mine has. And while the numbers tell one story, when you actually look at it, the story is quite different. The 3rd Gen Prius is showing numbers in the low 20s for cargo space back there, and the C-Max here is showing numbers a little bit higher in the 20s, but the difference is in height. And as you know, you often don't stack things really high in the cargo area on these cars. So, for all intents and purposes, practical purposes, the 3rd Gen Prius actually has more cargo space in my opinion. It's deeper, it's wider, and it's relative to the back window, it's actually taller. Okay, if you want to use all of the C-Max's space, then yeah, there is a little bit more. However, when it comes to cargo capacity for people, the C-Max is bigger than the 3rd Gen Prius. This height gives you tons of headroom, and because of that, you sit a little more upright, which also gives you more leg room front and rear. Also, these rear seats are sculpted, the front seats are sculpted in the rear, and because of that, you end up with quite a bit of leg room from that as well, and your feet can easily go under the seats in front of you. So in terms of that space, it's quite a bit bigger than the Prius. It's not quite as wide, so your shoulder width is a little bit less in the back here if you had 3 across, but other than that, the C-Max kind of wins against the Prius on space. Let's talk fuel economy though. All right, basically Prius V is in the 44s, 3rd Gen Prius is in the 50s, and this is 47 combined, right in between. Frankly, I think they're good numbers from Ford. This is, according to Ford, their 3rd gen of their hybrid powertrain, 2-liter Atkinson motor, which basically combined is doing 188 horsepower, which is quite a bit more than the Prius V and the Prius, frankly. So you're getting more power with better or almost as good a numbers when you compare the two vehicles. So that's doing pretty well on that account as well. let's talk handling. You know, frankly, there's not a lot to say in a hybrid like this. You know, it handles well, as to be expected. It's not a sporty car, but, you know, compared to the Prius I drove, you know, I remember the Prius being kind of, I don't know, appliance-like, I guess you could describe it. That's what a lot of automotive magazines probably say, too. You know, it just kind of does what it needs to do, and that's about it. Certainly the C-Max is more sporty than that. I'll say that. You know, it doesn't encourage you to whip through corners and stuff like that, but the steering is pretty quick. It's nice and direct. The handling is well controlled, but yet it doesn't ride super rough. So as a whole, Ford did a good job with the C-Max in terms of handling and ride comfort. It's to be as expected without being terribly mushy or overly aggressive. The brake feel on the 2013 C-Max definitely took some adjusting to. When I went to the dealership to pick it up, they asked me to drive it out of the showroom, which I thought was kind of cool. Except for when I first hit the brakes, my head went slamming forward, and I looked like I was an amateur driver. It was a little embarrassing. Fortunately, they've known me there for quite a long time, so it wasn't that big of a deal. They're very touchy, very sensitive. You got to learn to be a lot lighter on the brakes. Really try and utilize the regen and get more battery, get more charge into the battery. Speaking of charge into the battery, of course, Ford uses their modern dashboard here. On the right, you've got the growing leaves, which I talked about in the Ford Fusion, which are supposed to show you basically how green you're driving. The more leaves, the greener you are, the better fuel economy you're getting. And then on the left, you have various screens that can show you different amounts of information as it relates to your basically how much electric power you're using, how much regen you're making, your instant fuel economy, your average fuel economy, all of that. Quite cool. Definitely, you know, my buddy has this, like I said, a 3rd gen Prius, and they're always looking at those gauges, kind of like seeing how they're doing on fuel economy and kind of gaming the system a little bit. So Ford does a great job on giving you lots of information and feedback on that front. Exterior styling on the C-Max is definitely an improvement, I think, compared to the Prii out there. You know, when I pulled up on this car at night, parked at my house, I was reminded that it does have the profile of an economy car as a whole, but in the light, you know, you see a lot of the lines. The front end is really cool. It's pretty aggressive. It mimics the Focus. Nice headlamps and lines to it. And, you know, it's got the hybrid labels on the side and these little windows up here in the front, which are hit or miss, kind of Honda Fit-ish. Overall, I think it's a cool looking car. I think it looks better than the Prius. However, you do end up with this kind of tall aspect to it, which some people like, some people don't. Take it or leave it as you like it, but in terms of our hair bands, plenty of room for the big hair. Being inside the C-Max is pretty cool. Lots of glass, so you can easily see out. Nice sight lines, tons of headroom, as I mentioned. And frankly, it doesn't try so hard to be a hybrid. Whereas the Prius has this big flying buttress thing, bridge right here with space underneath that I talked about in another video. I don't really like that, and a lot of other people don't too. And the dash is supposed to be all futuristic and cool. I think it's just trying a little bit hard to be a hybrid. This model's a little bit more after other Ford models like the Focus and the Escape. It looks nice. It's classy. You know, you got the sync screen right here, which is easily accessible, nice and big, right there where you can see it. You got redundant controls right here, which makes it even easier to use. And then right below that, you have your air conditioning and, you know, HVAC controls. So as a whole, nice looking interior, classy. It's gonna, you know, last a long time in terms of its looks, and it's not trying too hard to fit the hybrid model. So let's just cut to the tape here. Sync is a good infotainment system. I already did a review on it. I'm not going to go through this again. They keep making improvements to it. I have no problems with it. I can sync my phone quickly. I can find my music. I can call people. I can control the climate. And then on top of it, they added redundant controls for those people who aren't touchscreen savvy. I will admit, I do find myself going to those controls for the climate control, not so much for the radio. Maybe it's just kind of what you intuitively think of using for a touchscreen. But again, I'm a proponent of a sync. Upgrade to it if you can. It's worth the money. So let's talk some cool features. The C-Max has a few things that I find interesting. Firstly, it's got cargo capacity underneath the floor of the second row where your feet would go. You lift up what appears to be the cargo mats, and there's little spaces under there. They're not particularly huge. I'm not sure what you'd put in there, especially given that you always step on them with dirty feet and stuff, but they're there. I guess for me, having little kids, it'd be nice to store some toys down there on long road trips or something, but it's just kind of a cool feature. Another cool feature is these mirrors. These mirrors have an inset wider angle mirror, which allows you to see your blind spots a lot better and things like that. So it's really a neat thing. I don't know if other cars have already been using these, but this is the first one I drove that has them, particularly on the left, the driver's side and the passenger side mirrors. So that's kind of cool. Also, this model is supposed to be able to go up to 62 miles an hour on electricity alone. I was not able to do that. You can get coasting on the highway, kind of, or gliding, where the electric motor kicks in and the gas motor turns off while you're already at speed. But in terms of like accelerating up to 62 miles an hour, like on an on-ramp, while staying in electric, I wasn't able to do it, but Ford says you can, so that's kind of cool. Let's talk price. It's relatively simple. It's cheaper than the Prius V. It's a little bit more expensive than the third-gen Prius. Third-gen Prius is like $24,000 and almost $25,000. The C-Max you have here, this one's got a few options on it, like sync and heated seats and stuff, so it's a little over $27,000. And $27,000 and some change is about where the Prius V starts. So as a whole, right in between, you got lithium-ion batteries in this, which are more expensive, obviously, than the nickel-metal batteries in the other two. So that being said, you know, you do have a little bit extra bang for the buck there. And then lastly, people are going to be cross-shopping those two vehicles, and you can see it's right in between them in price, so it's definitely comparable. So the C-Max, is this the Van Halen of hybrids, or is this the pick your band? I'm going to say it's the latter, where bands took the theme that Van Halen had kind of set as a precedent and took it and made it their own. Ford's definitely done that here. It's provided features that the public wants in a package that's quite nice. You pick your hairband that you like, and this will be the C-Max comparison. Thanks for watching, guys. Once again, I think it's important to give a shout out to the people who let me drive these vehicles. I got this C-Max for a couple days. It was the first one they got in. That's Gurley Motor Company, the oldest Ford dealership in New Mexico. So big shout out to them for letting me test drive the C-Max for a couple days. Also, big thanks to you guys for watching. I appreciate you subscribing. I appreciate your comments and your views. Keep them coming. I'm really working on these videos. I'd like to improve them. So let me know what you'd like to see, and I'll see what I can do. Thanks again for watching.